The crystal spires of Lumina glittered under the light of 3 moons, casting prismatic reflections across the grand plaza where the annual astral festival was in full swing. Hundreds of Luminians glided across the iridescent floor, their translucent bodies emanating soft blue light as they performed the traditional celestial dance. The air vibrated with harmonic tones from crystalline instruments, notes so pure they seemed to bend the light around them. Among them stood Alara, painfully alone. Unlike the others whose skin glowed with uniform azure luminescence, her epidermis flickered with unpredictable rainbow patterns, a genetic anomaly that marked her as different from birth. She adjusted her maintenance worker's badge, a symbol of her low status that seemed to burn against her chest. "Excuse me," she murmured to a passing high-caste Luminian. "Would you care to?" The elegant female merely flicked her elongated fingers dismissively, continuing past without acknowledgement. It was the 7th rejection of the evening. From the diplomatic observation platform, Thorne Valdez watched with curious eyes. As Earth's newest cultural liaison to Lumina, he'd spent 3 months studying their rigid caste system, but seeing it in action still disturbed him. His attention kept returning to the solitary figure whose skin shimmered with colors unlike any other Luminian present. "Ambassador Valdez," whispered his Luminian guide, Mentor Kyrix, "I recommend focusing your attention on the high caste performances. They represent our true cultural achievements." Thorne nodded politely but continued watching the outcast. "Who is she?" Kyrix's mouth tightened. "A maintenance technician, 3rd caste. Her abnormal pigmentation is considered unfortunate." "She seems to know the dance movements perfectly," Thorne observed. "Lower castes are forbidden from studying artistic expressions," Kyrix replied sharply. "If she appears knowledgeable, it would be inappropriate." On the dance floor, Alara fought back tears as she watched couples swirl in perfect synchrony. Since childhood, she had secretly practiced these dances, studying them during her night shifts cleaning the Grand Academy of Arts. Not that it mattered. No one would ever dance with a rainbow-skinned maintenance worker. She turned to leave when she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Darian, her supervisor. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed. "Your presence disturbs the harmony." "The invitation stated all citizens were welcome," Alara replied quietly. "Welcome to observe from the designated areas," he corrected. "Not to participate. Know your place, technician." As Darian walked away, Alara's shoulders slumped. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps she should know her place. On the platform, Thorne had seen enough. "Excuse me," he said to Kyrix, "but I believe I should participate, not just observe. Isn't that the purpose of cultural exchange?" Before Kyrix could protest, Thorne descended the stairs toward the dance floor. The crowd parted around him. Humans were still novelties on Lumina, their solid, opaque bodies and varied coloration objects of fascination and slight distaste. Alara was nearly at the exit when she noticed the unusual silence falling across the plaza. She turned to see the crowd parting and a figure walking directly toward her. Not a Luminian, but a human, tall, with warm brown skin and curly black hair. His eyes, a startling amber color, were fixed directly on her. For the first time that evening, someone was actually seeing her. "Ambassador Valdez," she heard someone nearby whisper in shock. "What is he doing?" Thorne stopped before her and smiled, unaware that he was breaking a dozen social taboos simply by acknowledging her existence. "I couldn't help noticing," he said, "that no one here seems brave enough to dance with the most interesting person in the room." Alara stared at the human standing before her, his hand extended in invitation. The music continued around them, but to her it seemed as if time had slowed. Ambassador Thorne Valdez, she recognized him from news broadcasts, was actually asking her to dance. I don't understand," she stammered, her skin flickering with nervous pulses of violet and amber. "You wish to dance with me?" Thorne's smile remained steady. "That's generally what extending one's hand at a dance festival implies, yes." A circle of empty space had formed around them as other Luminians moved away, their disapproval radiating almost as visibly as their bioluminescence. Mentor Kyrix was pushing through the crowd, alarm evident in his rapidly pulsing light patterns. "Ambassador Valdez," Kyrix called sharply, "there are protocols." "Which I've studied extensively," Thorne replied without turning. His eyes remained fixed on Alara. And I believe the diplomatic handbook mentioned participating in cultural events as a key responsibility. Alara glanced between them, acutely aware of the growing spectacle. Sir, you don't have to do this. I was just leaving. And deprive me of learning authentic Luminian dance from someone who clearly knows the movements. Thorn raised an eyebrow. That would be a tremendous cultural loss. A whisper rippled through the crowd. How does he know she practices forbidden arts? Ilara's skin blanched to a pale white, the Luminian equivalent of a blush. I haven't. Thorn leaned closer, lowering his voice. I've been watching you. The way you follow each step with your eyes, the subtle movements of your fingers. You know this dance better than most here, don't you? For a moment, fear gripped her. If the High Council learned she had been secretly studying the sacred dances, but something in the human's honest gaze made her fears recede. Yes, she whispered back, I do. Then teach me, he said simply, his hand still extended. Hesitantly, she placed her slender, semi-translucent fingers in his solid human hand. A small gasp escaped her at the contact. Humans were so warm, their energy different from the cool vibrations of Luminian bodies. As they stepped onto the dance floor, the musicians faltered momentarily before continuing. Thorn placed his other hand respectfully at the traditional position above her waist, careful not to touch her, as was proper in formal Luminian dance. I should warn you, he murmured as they began to move. I've only studied the theoretical aspects of this dance. My practical execution might be somewhat creative. Despite her nervousness, Alara found herself smiling. Then follow my lead, ambassador. Thorn, please. I am Alara's. Their first steps were awkward. His solid human form lacked the fluid grace of Luminians, and she was stiff with self-consciousness. But as they continued, something remarkable happened. The traditional celestial dance, designed for the flowing movements of Luminians, transformed into something new as Thorn's human movements blended with her guidance. Where Luminian partners would synchronize their light patterns, Thorn compensated with expressive movements and subtle shifts in posture that complemented her flickering colors. Everyone's watching us, Alara whispered, her skin pulsing with nervous energy. Good, Thorn replied. Let them see what they've been missing. As they moved together, Alara gradually relaxed. For the first time in her life, she wasn't hiding her knowledge of the sacred dances. For the first time, someone was seeing her, truly seeing her. Why did you choose me? She finally asked. Thorn considered his answer carefully. On Earth, we have a saying, the most interesting people are rarely found in the center of the room. And in the Luminian hierarchy, I'm as far from the center as one can get. Perhaps, he acknowledged, guiding her through a turn. But there's something about you that outshines everyone here. Your colors, they're extraordinary. Do they always change like that? Alara nodded. It's a rare condition. Most Luminians consider it a defect. On Earth, we might call it being uniquely gifted, Thorn said. Your people don't know what they're missing. As the dance continued, others began to watch with curiosity rather than scorn. There was something mesmerizing about the contrast between the human's solid form and Alara's shifting colors, which now glowed with increasing confidence. By the time the music ended, Alara's skin was radiating a brilliant gold, the Luminian expression of joy that no one in the Grand Plaza could ignore. In the days following the Astral Festival, Alara found herself in unfamiliar territory, the subject of attention. As she moved through the maintenance corridors of Lumina's central hub, whispers followed her like shadows. That's her, the one who danced with the human. Did you see how her colors changed? I've never seen gold that bright. The High Council has summoned Mentor Kyrix to explain the incident. Alara kept her head down, her skin deliberately muted to a dim blue as she polished the crystalline walls. She had spent a lifetime perfecting the art of invisibility, and yet in one night, a single dance had made that impossible. The soft ping of her communication device startled her. The message was simple: Crystal Gardens, East Pavilion, sunset. No signature, but she knew. Her skin involuntarily flashed pink before she could suppress it. Quickly, she glanced around to ensure no one had noticed. The Crystal Gardens were public enough to be proper, yet secluded enough for conversation. As maintenance staff, she had legitimate reason to be there. The light sculptures required regular calibration. Still, meeting the human ambassador carried risks she couldn't ignore. You shouldn't go, warned Mila, her only friend among the maintenance workers, when Alara confided in her. The high castes are already talking. They say you bewitched him with your abnormal colors. That's ridiculous, Alara protested. Of course it is, Mila agreed. But when have facts ever mattered in matters of caste? They're looking for reasons to punish you for rising above your station. Despite the warning, as the three sons of Lumina began their staggered descent, Alara found herself at the East Pavilion. The crystal gardens were spectacular at sunset, thousands of crystalline formations capturing and refracting the changing light into cascades of color. Thorn was already waiting, dressed in the formal gray attire of the diplomatic corps, yet somehow looking more relaxed than any human she'd seen on Lumina. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said, rising to greet her. I wasn't sure I should, she admitted. Our dance has caused complications. So I've been informed, Thorn grimaced. I've received a formal request from the High Council to respect Luminian social hierarchies. Apparently, I've disrupted the harmony. We both have. Alara moved to a nearby crystal formation, adjusting its calibration. The movement gave her hands something to do, a reason to be there. You should know, interacting with me won't help your diplomatic mission. Thorn joined her, watching as her skilled fingers manipulated the crystal's internal structure, causing it to shift from azure to violet. What if the diplomatic mission I care about isn't the official one? Her fingers paused. What do you mean? I was sent here to build cultural understanding between our worlds. But the more I learn about Lumina, the more I realize that I'm only being shown what the High Council wants me to see. You've shown me more truth in one dance than I've learned in 3 months of official tour. Alara's skin rippled with cautious yellow curiosity. And what truth is that? That your society, for all its advances, still judges people by accidents of birth rather than character or talent. Thorn's voice was soft but firm, and that the most beautiful expressions on Lumina are the ones being suppressed. The sincerity in his amber eyes made her skin pulse with deep crimson, vulnerability, closely guarded emotion. She quickly dampened the response, but not before Thorn noticed. Your colors, he said, what do they mean? They're involuntary reactions, she explained reluctantly. Most Luminians learn to control them in childhood to show only socially acceptable patterns. I never could master that control. So you're essentially wearing your heart on your skin, Thorn said with wonder. That's beautiful. It's dangerous, she corrected, especially now. Over the next hour, as they walked through the gardens, Alara found herself speaking more freely than she ever had. She told Thorn about growing up as an anomaly, about her secret practice of the sacred arts in empty corridors during night shifts, about her dreams of someday creating light sculptures that combined movement and color. In turn, he shared stories of Earth, of societies that had fought against rigid class structures, of art that broke boundaries and changed perceptions. He described oceans and mountains and cities with such vivid detail that Alara's skin shimmered with imagined versions of places she'd never seen. As the last sun set, painting the crystal formations in deep amber light, Thorn's hand brushed against hers. The contact was brief, perhaps accidental, but Alara felt an electric current race through her body, causing her skin to momentarily flash with brilliant magenta, a color she had never displayed before. The look in Thorn's eyes told her he understood exactly what it meant, even if she herself did not. I should go, she whispered, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. When can I see you again? He asked. You shouldn't, she replied, taking a step back, for both our sakes. But even as she turned to leave, her skin betrayed her with pulses of longing, brilliant blues and purples that spoke more honestly than her words ever could. And in the shadows beyond the gardens, unnoticed by either of them, a high-caste observer recorded everything with cold, calculating precision. The news came like a shockwave through Lumina's rigid hierarchy. The culmination ceremony, traditionally reserved for high-caste artistic presentations, would include a diplomatic cultural exchange featuring Ambassador Valdez. The High Council had apparently decided that showcasing interspecies harmony would serve their interests better than punishing the ambassador's social transgressions. For Alara, however, the consequences were swift and severe. Her maintenance duties were restricted to the outer sectors, far from the cultural center where she might encounter Thorn. Her supervisor, Darian, seemed to take particular pleasure in assigning her the most grueling tasks. "The council knows about your illegal practice of sacred arts," he informed her with cold satisfaction. "They've chosen leniency given your condition." His eyes flicked dismissively over her multi-hued skin. "But you are forbidden from attending the culmination ceremony, even as an observer." That evening, drained and dejected, Alara returned to her small quarters to find Mila waiting anxiously outside. "He's been looking for you," Mila whispered, glancing nervously down the corridor. "The human, he left this." She pressed a small crystal into Alara's hand, a calm device but not Luminian technology. It was Earth-made, untraceable on Luminian networks. Alone in her room, Alara activated it with trembling fingers. Thorn's face appeared in miniature holographic form. "Alara, I've been trying to reach you." His voice was urgent. "The council has invited me to perform at the culmination ceremony to demonstrate human dance forms. I've requested a Luminian partner for cultural fusion, and they've assigned some high-caste choreographer who moves like a textbook illustration." He paused, his eyes intense even in miniature. "It should be you. Meet me at the abandoned sonic training hall in Sector 7 if you can, please." The rational part of her knew she should ignore the message. Meeting him again would only bring more trouble. And yet, 3 hours later, she found herself slipping through seldom-used maintenance tunnels towards Sector 7. The abandoned training hall was a relic from an earlier artistic era, its acoustics now considered obsolete. Alara had discovered it years ago during maintenance rounds, using it occasionally for her secret practice. As she entered, she found Thorn already there, moving through what appeared to be human dance steps. "You came," he said, his face lighting up as he saw her. "This is madness," she replied, though her skin betrayed her with ripples of delighted blue. "If I'm caught here." "I know the risks," Thorn said, crossing to her. "But after watching recordings of traditional performances, I realized something. The high-caste dancers, they're technically perfect but emotionally empty. There's no passion, no true expression." "That's considered the highest form of control," Alara explained. "Emotion is seen as primitive." "It's also what makes dance worth watching," Thorn countered. "And you, Alara, when you moved at the festival, even for those few moments, you brought something to life that none of them could." He reached for her hands, and this time she didn't pull away. "Dance with me at the culmination, not as my assigned partner but as a surprise finale. Show them what true artistic fusion can be." "They would never allow it," she whispered. "They won't know until it's happening," he said with a mischievous smile. "By then, it will be too late to stop it without creating a diplomatic incident. You would risk your position as ambassador." "For the right cause, yes." His amber eyes held hers. "Your people need to see what they've been denying themselves by clinging to these rigid hierarchies, and you deserve to be seen, Alara." Over the next 5 nights, they met secretly in the abandoned hall. Thorn taught her Earth's contemporary dance forms, so different from Luminian movement, based on weight and gravity rather than light and vibration. In turn, she showed him how to adapt Luminian forms to his solid human body. Together, they created something entirely new, a dance that honored both traditions while transcending them. As they practiced, something else grew between them. Touches lingered longer, gazes held deeper meaning, and Alara stopped trying to hide the brilliant colors that spread across her skin whenever Thorn was near. On the night of the culmination ceremony, the grand performance hall was filled with Lumina's elite. Alara, disguised in a maintenance uniform with a hood that partially concealed her distinctive skin, positioned herself near a service entrance. From her hidden vantage point, she watched Thorn perform a diplomatic earth dance with his assigned partner, technically proficient, but, as he had predicted, utterly soulless. When it concluded, polite light patterns flickered through the audience, the Luminian equivalent of reserved applause. Thorn stepped forward to deliver his closing remarks. "Thank you for allowing me to share a small piece of Earth's culture with you. However, during my time on Lumina, I've discovered something extraordinary, a fusion of our worlds that transcends anything I could have imagined." A murmur ran through the crowd as Thorn turned toward the service entrance where Alara waited. "I'd like to conclude with a true cultural exchange, one that honors both our traditions and points toward new possibilities." It was her cue. Stepping out of the shadows, Alara removed her maintenance hood, her skin immediately blazing to life with swirling patterns of blues, purples, and golds that she no longer tried to suppress. Gasps echoed through the hall as she walked to center stage. Mentor Kyrex half rose from his seat, but the High Chancellor, intrigued by this unexpected development, gestured for him to wait. As their dance began, the lights in the hall dimmed, making Alara's luminescent skin the primary source of illumination. Their bodies moved in perfect harmony, his solid strength complementing her fluid grace, her light patterns responding to his movements like a visual echo of the music. What began as shocked silence from the audience gradually transformed. Even the most rigid high-caste Luminians couldn't look away from the breathtaking display of artistry unfolding before them. By the time they reached their final movement, Thorn lifting Alara in a spiraling motion as her skin exploded in a supernova of color, the entire hall was pulsing with the Luminian expression of awe. In that perfect moment, suspended in Thorn's arms, Alara's colors revealed everything she felt for him, and he, though human and without luminescent skin, somehow shone just as brightly with his answer. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. The aftermath of their performance swept through Luminian society like a storm. Recordings, officially prohibited but inevitably captured, spread through all levels of the caste system. For the first time in centuries, Luminians from different castes found themselves discussing the same topic with equal fervor, the dance that defied tradition. Alara had expected punishment. Instead, she found herself in unprecedented territory, the subject of debate among artistic circles, her name mentioned in council meetings, her technique analyzed by dance instructors who would have previously refused to acknowledge her existence. "They're calling it chromatic fusion," Mila told her, barely containing her excitement as they met in Alara's quarters. "The high-caste youth are trying to replicate your color patterns. Some are even using artificial pigments to create the effect." Alara's skin rippled with disbelief. "That can't be true." "It is, and that's not all. 3 maintenance workers have petitioned for arts training. The council hasn't denied them outright. They're actually considering it." Despite these developments, the establishment wasn't surrendering without resistance. Darian had been reassigned, but her new supervisor kept her isolated from public areas. Meanwhile, Thorn faced diplomatic consequences. His cultural exchange visits were suddenly rescheduled, his access to Luminian officials restricted to formal settings. 2 weeks after the performance, Alara received another message on the Earth-Com device. "Observatory deck, midnight." The observatory deck was technically off-limits without authorization, but maintenance access codes made such restrictions meaningless to Alara. When she arrived, she found Thorn waiting, gazing out at the star-filled sky through the crystal dome. "They're sending me back to Earth," he said without preamble, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "Apparently, I've fulfilled my initial cultural assessment mission." Alara felt her colors drain to pale blue, Luminian sorrow. "When?" 3 days. He turned to her, determination in his eyes. "I've requested a continuation, proposed additional cultural initiatives, even suggested a formal alliance between our artistic institutions. They're considering all of it, which is diplomatic speak for delay until I'm gone." She moved beside him, looking out at the stars that separated their worlds. "You knew this would happen when you insisted on our performance." "I knew there would be consequences," he admitted. "I didn't expect them to act so quickly." Silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. "Come with me," Thorn finally said, turning to face her fully. "To Earth." Alara's skin flashed with shocked white. "What?" "Earth has an exchange program for exceptional cultural ambassadors. I've already submitted your name with recordings of our performance as evidence of your qualifications." His words came faster now, passionate and urgent. "You would be welcomed there, Alara, your art valued, your uniqueness celebrated, not hidden." Leave Lumina. The concept was almost incomprehensible. No low-caste Luminian had ever been permitted off-world. They would never allow it. "The council might not," Thorn acknowledged, "but the Earth Cultural Ministry has significant influence. If they formally request you as a cultural asset." He reached for her hands. "It's possible, Alara." Her skin swirled with conflicting emotions. Hope, fear, longing, creating a tapestry of colors so complex that Thorn could only marvel at it. "And if I did," she whispered, "what would I be to you on Earth? A diplomatic project, a cultural curiosity?" In answer, Thorn drew her closer, one hand gently tracing the luminescent patterns along her cheek. You would be whatever you choose to be, but to me, his amber eyes held hers. To me, you would be the beginning of everything. When his lips met hers, Alara's colors exploded in patterns never before seen on Lumina, human passion translated into Luminian light. The kiss was a bridge between worlds, neither fully Earth nor Lumina, but something gloriously new. On the night before Thorn's scheduled departure, the High Council convened an emergency session. The recordings of their performance had reached Earth, where the Cultural Ministry was indeed expressing strong interest in Luminian artistic forms, specifically the innovative chromatic techniques demonstrated by dance specialist Alara. Faced with potential diplomatic advantages, the Council made an unprecedented decision. Alara was summoned at dawn. Standing before them, she expected banishment or worse. Instead, the High Chancellor addressed her with a formality previously unimaginable. Technician Alara, he began, his tone carefully neutral, in recognition of your unique contribution to interplanetary cultural exchange, the Council has approved your temporary assignment to Earth's Cultural Ministry as a Luminian artistic representative. She stood in shock as he continued outlining the terms. A one-year assignment, diplomatic credentials, cultural ambassador status, all while making it clear this was merely to facilitate beneficial relations, not acknowledgement of her supposed artistic merit. When she found Thorn waiting at the spaceport, his ship ready for departure, his face broke into a radiant smile at the sight of her official travel credentials. How did you manage this? He asked, embracing her without concern for the startled officials nearby. I didn't, she replied, her skin pulsing with joy so bright it almost hurt to look at. Apparently, Earth specifically requested me. His innocent expression didn't fool her for a moment. Did they? How fortunate. As they boarded the ship that would take them to Earth, Alara felt the weight of Luminian hierarchy falling away. Behind them, a small crowd had gathered at the viewing deck, not just officials, but maintenance workers and service staff, come to witness one of their own departing for the stars. Among them stood Mila, alongside a group of lower-caste Luminians wearing makeshift artistic emblems. They raised their hands in farewell, their skin patterns deliberately mimicking Alara's unique colors in a silent statement of solidarity. This is just the beginning, Thorn murmured, noticing her gaze fixed on the growing crowd. One dance can start a revolution. As the ship prepared for departure, Alara watched her world grow smaller through the viewport. She had no illusions about the challenges ahead. Earth would have its own prejudices, its own hierarchies to navigate. The path she and Thorn were choosing would not be easy. But as his hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with her luminescent ones, she knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. Two beings from different worlds who had created their own constellation, their own dance among the stars. Her skin settled into a steady, pulsing rose gold, the color of new beginnings, of possibilities unlimited as the universe stretching out before them.